Look out, ladies. Israeli counter-terror expert and international heartthrob Staff Sergeant Yared and Ben-Caro recently returned to Fort Knox, Kentucky. He continued his work with the United States Army in a series of elaborate military training programs. Many of his fans had been anxiously awaiting his return, and they were not disappointed. Sergeant Ben-Caro is available for the past few weeks to sign copies of his full-length book, Dreidel Full of LEAD, From the Wild West to the Streets of Gaza. Yared also personally met with fans for autograph and photograph opportunities. He held multiple meetings relating in harrowing, nail-biting detail his accounts of his own life-and-death experiences in the historic counter-terror military assault of Operation Cast Lead. And of course, Yared also recounted the tales of his many exciting adventures and occasional mishaps with the Catawban community. Staff Sergeant Yared and Ben-Caro even agreed to an exclusive interview with Quicksie 98.3. Listen in.
Although most of our listeners know who you are, describe yourself for those who don't know you.
So my name is Staff Sergeant Yared Ben-Caro. I am a dual citizen American-Israeli, and I served in the Israel Defense Force, Paratrooper Battalion 890, as lead designated marksman and lead spike missile specialist, as well as Special Forces Reserve Battalion 6310. And I am currently working with both the United States military and other government organizations, security organizations, etc.
Perfect. Okay, and then tell me about your book.
So I wrote a book entitled A Dreidel Full of LEAD, From the Wild West to the Streets of Gaza. And the premise of the book is a description of the Middle Eastern conflicts in Israel, specifically Operation Cast Lead. At that point, there had been no accurate first-person accounts written of any of the military conflicts, and much of the media information that came out about that was grossly inaccurate and full-on propaganda. So it was very important for me to set the record straight, especially considering the fact that there were allegations of war crimes, false allegations of war crimes, and other very, very gross inaccuracies.
Now, was that the only thing that inspired you to write it, or was it something that you was writing a book something that you'd always wanted to do, or was this something that just kind of came about at the time, or how did that come about?
So writing is something that I was always very interested in. When I was 8 years old, I wrote a 20-page whodunit, and from that point on, I always had a strong affinity for writing. And in university, my major was actually English literature, which is why I work in security.
Very fitting, very apropos.
And so writing was something that I very much enjoy, and I specifically want to write things that have a purpose and have a message. And describing the true accounts of current political events, especially in regards to the heinous corruption and atrocities of various terrorist organizations that the Western world is almost completely oblivious to, was something that I felt absolutely needed to be documented.
Now, the title, what is the significance behind the title? I mean, is there what kind of inspired that?
It is actually a play on words in the Hebrew language. Basically, Operation Cast Lead is actually a horrible translation of the Hebrew title of the operation, Beratzuka. And the idea behind the title was the war started during the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah. And we have a popular Hanukkah song in Israel about spinning a lead dreidel, which is a toy kind of like a top. And it's almost like dreidels are almost like dice. You spin them and they have different sides, and where it lands determines the outcome of the game. And when we began that operation, our analysts were giving predictions that were all over the place, with as many as 500 Israeli military casualties. So going into that operation was a gamble of sorts, so we named the operation off of that Hanukkah song about this spinning lead dreidel. But some journalist somewhere put that Hebrew title through Google Translate or something of that nature, and the title came out as Operation Cast Lead, and that's what the Western world has gone with, even though that makes absolutely no sense. So also, to be clear, the ultimate outcome of that operation was that we lost 10 Israeli military personnel as opposed to the 500, which made it one of the most successful counter-terror operations in modern history.
Wow. Now, if you had to single out one thing that you experienced that, and I know that has to be hard because there are so many, but if you had to single out one of them that was the most impactful then and now, what would it be and why?
There were two, or I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm going to give two quick experiences that really, really impacted me in my experience.
Okay.
First, I ended up capturing two Palestinian Arab males that were trying to work with a Hamas bomb maker to set explosives at an Israeli fortified tower on the border.
Mm-hmm.
And these two individuals were both about 14 years old. And the only reason that those two individuals were alive, or are still alive, is because of a series of mistakes on our end, and that we actually received permission to take the shot because they were actually working to set explosives. And another soldier ended up blowing the shot, etc., and we ended up capturing them instead. But the point is, this is something that the Western world and the media does not realize when you see headlines about quote-unquote Palestinian Arab children getting shot in a military campaign. They don't realize that Hamas and other terrorist organizations are actually using them to plant explosives. And in this case, it was even more heinous because they were actually using these two 14-year-old boys as guinea pigs to make sure that our defense systems were down.
Oh, my gosh.
So that's the one experience that really impacted me. Golda Meir, one of our previous prime ministers, is quoted as saying that there will be peace in the Middle East when the Arabs love their own children more than they hate ours. And that was something that I saw in a very, very personal way. Another experience that I will relate quickly, when I went to the Gaza Strip, Operation Cast Lead. According to the official records, I fired the first shots of ground troops in that war. I'm not entirely sure that that's true, but it's on official record. It sounds good, so I roll with it. But point is, when we went into these different areas in the Gaza Strip, there was this one neighborhood that was all affiliated with higher-end Hamas terrorists and leaders. And we went into the houses, and they had chandeliers, gold plating in the bathrooms, plasma screen TVs, swimming pools, things of that nature. And again, this is an area that's claiming to be impoverished and receiving literally billions of dollars in aid money. And a wealthy philanthropist by the name of George Soros donated over $1 billion to build greenhouses all throughout the Gaza Strip. And when I went into these massive mansions of immense luxury, I opened the refrigerator. There was no food in the refrigerator besides outdated UN donations. And in the greenhouses, there was absolutely nothing growing in them. Even though you could flip a switch and water would irrigate the entire greenhouse, there was literally no food to be found. Which means that they were literally starving themselves, and even more so starving the poor people of the Gaza Strip in order to achieve political ends, to create humanitarian crises, to control the food supply, etc. And that level of corruption and that level of cruelty to their own people, to literally their own neighbors, to their fellow Palestinian Arabs, that was something that shocked me.
Man. I mean, that puts a lot of things in perspective. For sure, I mean, about the things that you saw while you were over there. Now, hearing that you were in Kentucky recently, what was your time in Kentucky like?
So, one of the things that I do for work now is I work with the American military, largely bringing my experiences in Israel and the Middle East into training programs with the American military. I am not authorized to go into detail about the different programs I do, but I travel to different military bases to help teach and be an instructor for these different programs and otherwise manage the programs. So I was recently at Fort Knox, which I admit I am biased. Fort Knox and the surrounding communities of Radcliffe and E-Town are one of my favorite, if not my favorite, bases to work at. And so I was working with those training programs and also meeting up with some of my fans, if you will, and other supporters for book signings and discussing some of my personal experiences. Had a lot of great experiences with my Catawban community, as we say in the local dialect, Omnog Champa, and also meeting up with one of my favorite fans, Mary Catherine.
Very nice. Very nice. What are you currently doing? And what are your plans for the future?
So the future is still to be determined, as always, but I am currently working with various military training programs. I'm working with some programs in conjunction with the Department of Homeland Security. I will soon be returning to Israel in a few weeks for a military deployment in Yehuda v'Shomron, sometimes referred to as the West Bank. And I am currently looking at different options for my next either literary or media-type production. One of the projects that I'm considering is an in-depth discussion of the Armenian genocide from 1915 to 1923. And that incident is incredibly important to the 20th century history and modern history in general, mostly because the Turks implemented a system of genocide against 1.5 million Armenians, and they really pioneered a lot of the techniques that the Nazis used in the Holocaust, including labor camps and death marches and loading people into overcrowded cattle cars and things of that nature. To the point that in the 30s, when the Nazis were determining their final solution, i.e., eradication of all Jewish and other undesirable persons, they said, well, what will the world say? What will the world think if we do that? And the answer was literally, well, it's only 15 to 20 years after the Turkish genocide of the Armenians, and nobody cares. Therefore, if no one cares about the Armenians, no one's going to care about the Jews. So it's just very, very important for us to understand that we cannot stand quiet in the face of such extreme atrocities, because sooner or later, going to set a precedent, and people will continue to do this in other parts of the world, and it's absolutely unacceptable.
Absolutely. Thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to my next return to Radcliffe and E-Town, my next training program in the upcoming months.